Um,
Okay. Hi, I'm Ariana.
Ariana is going to be checking the YouTube comments from students and reading them out loud as they come. So during Juan's presentation, if you have any questions, and then we'll get into the Ask Me Anything part, and we'll keep an eye on the questions.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I'll do that on my phone.
Okay. So sorry about that interruption, guys. Once again, this is Juan Garzon. And Juan, do you want to tell us a little bit about your current job and your background?
Sure. I'm currently a software developer and a tech lead at iCapital Network. It's a financial technology startup in here in New York. I've been working there for a few years now, for almost actually 3 years. It'll be 3 years in August. Before that, I was working at a social network called Ivy. And before that, I was working at Scholastic, working on educational software. And before that, Mouse. And and I spent a lot of time with Mouse as a student, teacher, volunteer, and I've been with the organization since it was born. I was born in Queens, so I grew up in Queens. I have a long history with New York and technology, and my background in coding is pretty pretty vast. I'm what's known as a full stack developer. There's a front end and back end developers, which basically means somebody who focuses on what you see and somebody who focuses on the data. A full stack developer is somebody who focuses on both. That's about it. From what I can tell you about my life.
Great. Can you tell us, maybe to start with, what is a day in the life at work like for you?
Day in the life of work for me is it's mostly sitting in front of you. When you're coding, you can code in just about anything, any kind of text editor. So, but usually to make your job easier, we use a tool called an IDE. It's just a way of making the coding process a lot easier. I use a program called RubyMine because I code in Ruby and in a framework called Ruby on Rails. So I use that to code. So I'm usually, my computer, if you were to walk behind me on any given day, my computer looks like the code from the Matrix. It's green. It will confuse most people who walk by it. So most of the day I'm staring at that screen. So the workflow for my job is somebody has something they want to add to an application, or somebody wants to develop an app, right? So you get a list of features, and everything on your apps, on your websites, every interaction that you take for granted, like I want to click on this button, and when I click on this button, I want this other action to happen. I want this window to show up, or I want this graphic to show up. Every one of those details has to be written down in what's called a feature, and they send those features off to us. And then we look at each of those requirements and we start coding it in. But everything needs to be accounted for. And if there's something that they didn't account for it, we have to go back to the project manager who manages the overall application and tell them, hey, what do you mean, or what do you want? So a lot of my day is reviewing these requirements, coding, and then communicating with the project manager. I'm also doing code reviews. So whenever you are coding, you can't just add that code to the code base without it getting approved by at least 2 other developers. and this is true for anybody. Like you always want to review the code for your coworkers, because especially nowadays with teams being so big, you want to get some kind of visibility on the code, because there are people who are working on parts of the code that you may never see, but you may need to debug or take a look at some point down the road. And you want things to be fairly consistent. And then the other thing I'm doing most of the day is spending my time on Google, looking up how to solve problems that I will come across during development.
Great, that's awesome. So for anyone watching, I just want to remind viewers that this is an Ask Me Anything. So if you have any questions about what it's like to be a software developer or a tech lead, or about how Juan went from a public high school student in Queens to his current job, please put those comments in just leave a comment and we will ask them to Juan. We'll see that. And there's also going to be a sign-in sheet. So if you have a moment to sign in, please do that as well. That'll be in the comments. Cool. So can you tell us, just while we're waiting for more questions to come through, what is your favorite part of your job?
The favorite part of my job, it's whenever I get a chance to work with new technology. So, and it doesn't. So when you think about software development, I guess a lot of people may call it just generic coding, and you might be familiar with all these different programming languages, like I mentioned Ruby. There's also Python, C++. I always like doing anything that's brand new. So one of the things that I got really excited about not too long ago was I built a program in Node, which is built in JavaScript, and it was just a file encryption algorithm to help us encrypt files for my company. I had never done that before, and so that was exciting. So every time I get a chance to work on something new, something novel, machine learning, for example, is something that I'm interested in learning, and that's becoming more and more prevalent. So the fact that I have to always stay up to date with my skills and I'm constantly learning is one of the things I enjoy the most.
That's great. Can you tell us what was your path like to get to this job? You told us a bit about working at different places, but did you go to school? And if so, what did you study? And if not, how did you learn these skills?
So as a high school student, I got interested in technology because of the mouse program, but I didn't really know how to code. Back in the early 2000s, I started with HTML and building websites. So I started teaching myself how to do that. And back then it was really simple because the websites were a lot simpler. And you could also like download a web page and then start messing with the HTML and the code there. And I started learning little by little. But I went to college. I went to SUNY Plattsburgh, and I got a degree in computer science. They taught me how to write in Java. They taught me how to program robots. But that didn't really, that's not really the full picture. Because you go to school, you'll learn how to code, but it wasn't job experience. After getting my degree, it took me another 5 years before I got into the career I wanted. Some of that was insecurity. I didn't feel like I was good enough. And some of that was just you don't know how to manage how to get into a field. Like I didn't really have a mentor to get into it. So after working with Mouse for a few years as a facilitator and a trainer, I devoted about a year of my time to working on side projects. So I had my degree, but in order to get into my job, into my position, I needed to have a portfolio of current projects that I can say, hey, look, I know how to code. So I spent a year just working on different projects that interested me, different websites. Since I was always looking for whatever was new, I would just play with some new concepts and try to make things look cool. I even made a game, a Flash game for mouse. One of the things I did at that time, as just a way to be like, hey, I'm keeping my skills up to date. I'm building a portfolio, and then the other part was the interview process. So technical interviews are very different than your kind of regular interview. You have to sit in front of somebody, and they have to they give you a piece of paper or they give you a whiteboard, and they'll throw questions at you. You're not really in front of a computer coding. They just want you to understand, know if you understand the concepts that you need to know for to be a good developer. That's what they're looking for. So after failing at a bunch of interviews and then learning how to interview well, I was finally able to break into my first job as a software developer, working for Scholastic.
Wow, that is really helpful. I'm curious if you have any tips on how to interview well and that kind of thing.
How to interview well. Practice. You want to be coding a lot. There are books. There are actually books on mastering the technical interview. You want to master that. So I would recommend picking up one of those books. I can probably look one up. I forgot the name of one. But there are a lot of great resources. Practice with a friend where you're doing a pretend mock technical interview. Some interviews, like Google, has multiple phases to it. They're looking for multiple different skill sets. Know what they're looking for. So if they're, for example, some jobs will ask you specific things about the programming language, then you should sit there and make sure you are up to date on the little idiosyncrasy, the little details of the programming language, you know. And because they're going to throw you curveballs. They're going to ask you some certain things that you should know, and then things that you may not think about because you're just so used to coding in a certain way. So just, do a nice good overview, do it over and over again. It might take you a couple interviews before you realize what is the scope of things you're looking for, or they're looking for. But that's why you definitely need to pick up a book, or I'm not sure so much anymore, but there are also meetups on meetup.com where they'll do practice technical interviews with other software developers.
Oh, wow.
So that will help you definitely get your foot in the door.
That's great advice. You also talked about the confidence issue, like something stopping you from applying was just not being sure if you're good enough. And I know some of that, you can take on, like you said, by practicing and staying up to date and creating a portfolio. But do you have any other advice about like having the confidence to apply for stuff?
Confidence that's a hard one, right? Like, I got the confidence because of my older brother. Kind of really pushed me. I wasn't even thinking about applying for those kind of jobs. So I would recommend you look for a mentor. Look for somebody who can help you get through that door. Meetup is another great place for that, because you can meet people who are already working there. It's something I like to do. Actually, we hired a mouse alum at my company recently, so I'm really happy about that. And lack of confidence, or what they call imposter syndrome, is a very common problem for most people, and you're always going to feel a little bit you're always going to feel like you're not confident, but you should do it anyway, and you don't let failure hold you back. You haven't failed unless you've given up trying. I went on so many interviews before I finally got before I finally cracked the code, and then I had job offers coming in. That's part of that process. And to become confident, you got to get comfortable with not getting your way, or not getting the job. We get so wrapped up on like, I want this, that we get so afraid of not getting it that we either don't try, or we stop trying.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Ariana, do you have a question? You're muted, but.
Yeah, I had a question. I already put in my question. Oh, so I was meaning to ask you, what is your biggest challenge?
I didn't hear that. Did you hear that?
What's your biggest challenges in your job?
My biggest challenges in my job. That's a good question. My biggest challenges is communication. Trying to communicate. So when you get a feature, you have to estimate how long it's going to take. Except we're really bad at estimating how long things take. So if you can't communicate that, you can run into issues where what they call the business level, the people who are waiting for you to finish work, can become impatient. So one of the biggest challenges is being able to communicate, hey, look, this thing is going to take longer than we anticipate, and here are the different options. We can break it down. So one of the ways to mitigate that is just to have frequent and constant communication with the people who are stakeholders in whatever you're working on. If you don't make the mistake of under communicating. I think communication in general is an important life skill, but in my job it tends to be a little bit more difficult, simply because we're in front of a computer all day, and then you can go like an entire day without talking to somebody, just because you're so engrossed by it. So you have to make it a habit to check in and meet with people. The other challenge we have is a lot of times we can end up putting out a lot of fires. So we have our general like day-to-day work, but then things stop working on the website. And if things start working on the website, that then becomes a priority, and then suddenly you're working on 5 different problems at the same time. That can be a challenge, especially when there are deadlines. So being able to manage your workload and communicate problems is definitely an active part of your day. And if you don't communicate it right, then there can be some friction there.
It's very interesting. You know, I was expecting you to say the biggest challenge was technical, but it's interesting that it's communication.
Yeah, you can always get better at the technical stuff. Like the technical stuff is just a matter of time. The more exposure you have to it, the more you do it, you'll get better at it. But learning how to manage people, talk to people, plan things out for the future, those always require a lot more effort.
We have a question from the comments on YouTube. And remember, folks watching, we'd love to hear your comments and questions on YouTube. From Chinyere, I hope I'm saying that correctly, says it's not, it's not good to only just, or is it not good to only just pick up a book and research and study the company, but also to become knowledgeable about what exactly they're looking for? Like, I guess like a specific company, if you practice the general technical interviews, like how do you learn what the specific company is going to be looking for?
So in the job requirements now for software development jobs, they'll tell you what technology and what frameworks. So you have the languages. For example, in my case, the language is Ruby, but the framework is Ruby on Rails. So framework is just like an added layer on top of the language that you're learning. So when you look at the job description, you already have an idea of the kind of technologies that they're looking for. And so they're probably going to ask you questions in those spaces. So that's where you want to focus your attention in terms of the technical interviews. The personable interviews, like, because you do get like a personal, like one-on-one, whether or not like you're a good fit. Those matter, but they're weighted a lot less than the the technical stuff. Once you get to the technical interview, like that's when you're getting toward the end of the interview process and whether or not you're gonna get the job.
Excellent, thank you. And we have another comment or another question from a Canva Summer Bridge student, which is, did you struggle to find a career that you felt secure in? And if so, how did you maintain a positive attitude while exploring different career opportunities?
Repeat that again?
Did you struggle to find a career that you felt secure in is the first half. And then if so, how did you maintain a positive attitude while exploring different career opportunities?
Did I struggle to find a career I was comfortable in? Yes, I definitely struggled. Again, with the lack of confidence, I always wanted to be a software developer, but I didn't have the confidence to go for it. And I think that was my major struggle. I also tried to start my own company doing not software development, but IT, like computer repair stuff. I worked with mouse and I loved working with mouse. And so I did a bunch of jobs before I did the job I actually wanted to do. And that's what took like 5 years of me kind of getting the confidence to be like, oh, I'm good enough to do this. And it was more than just the degree that I needed to get the confidence. It was like I needed to actually put in the effort. And it took a full year of me just pretending like looking for a job was my job before I finally landed the company I wanted. And Scholastic was a great company. It's an educational, book company. And I could have stayed there forever, but I wanted to increase or spread or grow my horizon and see what else was out there. And when I went to work for Ivy, which is a social network, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't comfortable there because the work hours were a lot more than I anticipated. It was a much more ragtag team, so things were a lot more disorganized. And then when I left there to work at iCapital, things were a lot more structured. So you, especially in technology, you do tend to jump around from company to company, and sometimes you get a company that is really good, like Scholastic or iCapital, and you're like, oh, I can stay here forever. But also you want to grow and you want to learn some new things, and you want to kind of go up the ranks. So you kind of have to find push yourself to leave your comfort zone in order to find another place. You always kind of want to be right outside of your comfort zone when it comes to work.
Great. And that actually leads well into the next question we have from another Canvas student, which is, how do you manage your job and have time for your family as well? Like, especially, you mentioned some of these not being a good fit with the timing, but how do you find that balance?
How do I find work-life balance? So I have a terrible answer to that because my work is my life. Like I really enjoy my job. Like I really have. When work is good, I can work till midnight and not sweat. I'm not required to, which is a great position to be in. There's a big difference between a work that forces you to stay till midnight and a job that will where everyone's gone by 6, but you're like, oh, I want to keep working. How do I make time for it? You need a cutoff time. You for the most part, like at 6 o'clock, I'm out the door. Unless I have not met my requirements for getting work done, then that's the only time I will stay. So I manage it by making sure I'm meeting expectations, right? Every job you go work for, like there's an expectation of how you will perform. You want to at least meet that. Ideally you want to surpass it, but you should at least have a minimum standard of like, hey, this is what it means to do good work for the day. And if I hit that by 6 o'clock, then I'll leave. I feel comfortable leaving. If I don't, if I felt like I'm falling behind on something, that's when I stay over. It's kind of like extra credit at school, right? If you feel like you're not getting the grades you want to be getting, then you put in that extra effort so you can catch up a bit. So that's how I manage it. I'm also, my family lives in Florida, and I'm a single guy, so I don't have to balance family as much as some of my coworkers do, who have kids and have mortgages and all that. Um, and I get weekends off, so there's still plenty of time on the weekend. Vacation time is not like being a student where you get the summers off. I can choose what time of year I want to take vacation, and yeah, that's about it. And I have you have to take time out for yourself.
Definitely. All right, from Jay, we have, where do you see your job in a few years? Or where do you see yourself and your job in a few years?
Myself.
Oh, in like, say in 5 years is what it says.
In 5 years. That's an interesting question, because I just had a mid-year review, and this is a question that came up, and I didn't really have one of the things that came out of that is I need to think about where I want my career to be. So if I want to think out loud about it, I think I have kind of two goals for my future. I don't know if it's 5 years or 10 years, but I either want to have my own technology company, which is kind of always been like a dream of mine, like develop an app and launch a company from that. So I'm either going to do that, or I'm going to rise in the ranks and become a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. So you guys might be familiar with a CEO, which is the guy in charge of a company, but the CTO is the guy in charge of the tech at the company. And it's maybe a few levels below CEO, and it's probably the highest level I think you can get. I'm also interested in writing, so there's a possibility that I want to write some books, and increase the level of or the amount of programmers in the world. Like, I don't think most people realize how understaffed the software development world is. Like, there's plenty of jobs. Like, we are constantly interviewing and we can never fill positions. So right now we're all about filling those positions. Artificial intelligence is growing. There is a concern that even that might replace software developers, but somebody has to write it in the first place. So I think before we get then, you'll have a lot of new developers going into artificial intelligence, and that will explode, and we'll see how that evolves. So for me, as I increase my my presence as a leader in technology, I think the industry and my job will revolve more around writing smarter programs, smarter algorithms. So machine learning, artificial intelligence, and some new technology that we haven't even seen yet that we'll have to program for. We have smart wearable devices, for example, like the smart glasses. So Google came out with Google Glass a few years back. It bombed, but that idea is still there. So you'll need developers to develop apps for the glasses. Virtual reality is something that's gotten a lot of attention. So that's going to need a whole new host of developers. So as these new areas of technology start opening up, those are new places for programmers to go jump into and work. And I'll go toward whatever new shiny technology grabs my interest and try to make the most of it.
Awesome, thank you. From Leah, we have the question, is your job easy to handle on a daily basis?
Yes, it's easy to handle on a daily basis. I like what I do. You know, some days are stressful, but stress for me in my job, I guess, is I can't figure out why this isn't working. You know, and then I spend 3 hours and realize I put a period in the wrong place. That's stressful. But in the grand scheme of life, it could be a lot worse.
I'm really interested in what you were saying about you guys can't hire enough people, and I've heard that from a few different folks. Software development is obviously like a great career path to take for a lot of reasons, but yeah, I've heard that it can be, there's like not enough folks for all the jobs that are out there.
Yes.
And especially, but it is kind of an intimidating thing to pursue. Like, it sounds really, you have to be really smart and good at all kinds of stuff to become a software developer. But do you have any, if you could fill in the sentence, like, if you enjoy blank, you might enjoy software engineering, or like if you, as a high school student, if you're this kind of way, you might be good at this. How would you fill that in?
That's it's hard for me to visualize to answer that, because I know so many different types of personalities of people who work in software development. If you're somebody who needs to be active, like physically active and moving around your body, then that would be something that then working in front of a computer for 8+ hours a day is not something that's going to be appealing to you. So I find that software development is probably more appealing to those who like puzzles, or people with a creative streak, like people who like creativity, like, oh, I made this, I built this. Like people with an artistic bent. I've always thought of technology as being an extension of art, like, except like it's not like physical art, it's digital, but it feels just as real. So if you're okay with sitting, then you're for a long period of time, and you get some kind of enjoyment out of the act of creation, like hey, I made when I'm the reason this entire application works. When I click this, that happens, and then that makes a call to an API, and then that comes back, and then somebody just did their taxes because I did that. That for me is that keeps me going. I don't think there's anything holding you back from being a software developer. And I think it's appealing to it has a broad appeal, as long as you're willing to sit there. The hardest part for me was the initial friction, like when you get into it and it seems like gibberish, like you're looking at it and you're like, none of this makes sense. And I think that's where a lot of people get discouraged, when they look at it and they're like, I just can't possibly make sense of it. Sooner or later it does. Sooner or later you spend enough time with it, you've practiced it enough, you've heard these terms be regurgitated to you through school or just through experience and reading, that suddenly, like, it's like a light bulb went off in my head, and I'm like, oh, now this seems easy. The hardest part is always like that beginning, that going from zero to that base knowledge. Since I did that, every additional technology that comes out, it's easier for me to learn because they share a lot of the same concepts. So that's you'll do good in this industry if you're able to get past that initial hump and feel comfortable with the frustrations of, like, it's not quite working, I don't know why.
That's great. And I think it's really great to hear that there's not just one kind of person that's would make a good software engineer. It's like lots of different kinds of personalities and interests and skill sets. So that's really good to know. I think people sometimes have a pretty narrow view of what that person is, but it can be anyone.
Yeah, I have a lot of different, I have introverted people, extroverted people, older people, younger people. You have one girl on the team. We need more females, by the way, as software developers. That's something that's actively being looked for. And there's nothing stopping. There's really nothing there. It's hard. It's such a personal preference thing. Like, I don't get it. I mean, I played video games as a kid, so I was already in front of a computer for hours and hours and hours. So that didn't bother me. But there are some people who are very people oriented, very language communication oriented, that the idea of sitting in front of a computer is not appealing to them. So those are the people I think are the only ones that are not suited, and it's just because their interests lie in a different area.
Right. All right, so from Chinyere, we have 2 questions. The first one being, would you be interested in writing or teaching about software development? And kind of a companion question to that is, if you were to start your own company again, what kind of company would you want it to be exactly?
Ooh. What was the first question again?
Would you ever be interested in writing or teaching about software development?
Yes, both. Right now I write articles for Medium and for my company. So I do write some software development articles and I want to do more of that. And I'm always open for teaching. Mouse knows that. I'm always open for that. And what was the second question?
You mentioned you might, in 5 years, you might see yourself starting your own company again. What kind of company would that be?
Okay. So I would definitely want to develop apps. I want to release my own app. I have an app that I've been working on for a while that I haven't released yet, that I'm a little bit upset at myself that I haven't released yet, which was a fitness app. But I probably wouldn't start a company around that. Since I was a kid, I've always wanted to make my own video game. I don't want to work for a video game company, but I do kind of want to make my own video game. So if I were to open up my own company, it would be making my own mobile games, just because that would be a way of expressing creativity to me that has a personal value to me. And it wouldn't even matter if it's sold or not. I just want to make video games. The idea of like watching a little character jump around and like you did that, like that's just enough to keep me go to make me do it. And if I can make some money off of it, or if I make a career out of it, that's a bonus.
Excellent. We have one from another Canva Summer Bridge student, which is, what is a typical day or week like for you? I know you kind of got into the day, but maybe like what's your week look like?
Lots of meetings interspersed, like you Zoom calls like this, followed by lots of Googling and looking at my feature board to see where things are. So there's a lot of, okay. So we got testing, because you write your code, you got to test. Then there's the coding. Then you got to write tests for your code. Then you got to code review. Then you have your interviews to tell people what you've been working on. You have your meetings to talk about work that's coming up. And that's about it. Yeah, it's not terribly glamorous. It just keeps you busy a lot.
And it's usually about, do you work 9 to 6 or 10 to 6? What are your hours like?
Yeah, like 9 to 6. 9 to 6. Right now, because things are and a lot of companies are moving to this like remote worker. It's basically whatever 8-hour period you want to pick. So I've been sleeping in a lot more, and I'll work from like 8 or 10 to 8 or something. You tend, and because of this job, because of of everything that's going on right now, our jobs can be done from anywhere in the world. So it just gives us this very flexible view of what our hours are. You can almost pick your own hours, and you already know your workload. So it comes down to like getting the work done more so than picking or thinking about coming in at a certain time and leaving at a certain time. Some companies do that. Some companies do like measure it. But for the most part, software development companies just want to see the work get done. And we have more or less a good idea of how long that's going to take.
I had a question.
Sure.
One person asked, would you be interested in writing or teaching about software development?
What was that? Am I interested in writing about software development?
No, someone asked, would you be interested in writing or teaching about software development?
Yeah, I would be interested in writing and teaching software development. That's something I'm definitely interested in.
Great. I'm curious if you had advice for high school students who are, or like early college students, anyone who's like interested in maybe seeing about becoming a software engineer, how they can start learning or test it out?
How can they start learning? I should have prepared some websites that are good. I think I think it's called CodeRank. So if you want to get into software development, you need to have a GitHub account and set up some projects that you want to set up for yourself. The more personal it is to you, something you want to do, the better, because you'll be able to talk about it. There's also a website called CodeRank, or HackerRank. These are places that have questions, technical questions that you can practice, so you'd be better set up for those technical interviews. HackerRank and CoderRank. I would Google those. And those are good places to keep your practice going, work on side projects, pick your stack. So every developer has what they call a tech stack. That means the group of technologies that you know. So I mentioned Ruby and Ruby on Rails. I also know HTML, I know JavaScript, I know Flash, CoffeeScript, Java, C++. But most of those, like I don't use C++ in my job or anything like that, but most companies will have their tech stack. So mine is Ruby, HTML, JavaScript, Ruby on Rails. That basically comes down to it. So whatever, and usually companies follow a pattern. So some use my tech stack, and so others use Node, HTML, JavaScript. Others use Python. So just understand that you're gonna have to pick a stack, and companies will interview you on your ability to work within that stack.
That's good to know. Here's another question from Chinyere. How has the pandemic affected your software development career?
Not at all. Not at all. We're one of the few people that have continued business as usual. Half of my team was already remote before COVID, and I just don't go into the office. If anything, I miss my office because I had a better chair and I had central AC, so I'm a lot sweatier and uncomfortable by working from home. But my career, my company's still doing well, and most of the companies are doing just well. Zoom is doing really well. In general, I haven't heard any negative things to come out. And in fact, Twitter and Google came out saying that they're instituting work remote as like on a more permanent basis. So if anything, this will give us the ability to live and work from wherever we want on the planet, which is a big plus.
Yeah, definitely. What was your first, how did you get your first interest in software development? You said you've wanted to do that for a long time, but what kind of sparked that, do you know?
Pokemon.
Yeah.
Pokemon. Back with Pokemon Red and Blue, the original one, I remember playing that game, and there was all these hacks and glitches in the game. And I just got really interested in like how to make video games. That was how I got into, that was what sparked my interest in wanting to code. Then Mouse came in, taught me how to build my own computer. And then I just did a lot of like little side experiments. So I built my first computer. Then I started making websites, all toward this like idea that I wanted to make my own game because I love Pokemon so much. So that's kind of how the trajectory of how that happened. You're like, oh, video games are cool. Then a nonprofit organization teaches you some stuff about technology. You get a little bit more confident and you play around with it yourself until you get to some school and eventually somebody pays you to do something that you like.
Awesome. That's great. Here's a question from Victoria. I'm studying computer science and the curriculum can be overwhelming. What's your advice for computer science students?
The curriculum can be overwhelming. Oh man, I'm remembering a specific class when I was in school. Tutors. Get yourself a nice tutor, somebody who can help walk you through this, but won't do the work for you. That's important because it's easy for me to do the work for you as a mentor or a tutor. You want somebody who can walk you through. There are tons of YouTube videos, by the way, that are really good on teaching software development now. Those are good resources. Don't get discouraged by some of the really technical stuff. So I had to take a class called discrete math, which was really, really hard. And I'm pretty sure I passed it by the skin of my teeth. You don't use those concepts every day. Like I don't do a big O notation. You need to know what big O notation is, but you don't need to. I don't need to prove make mathematical proofs for my day-to-day job. Yeah, that's a tough one. So definitely look for a tutor. Look up some supplemental material online. Keep you want to have a thirst for knowledge because it's always going to, you're always, like I said, you have that friction in the beginning where things don't make sense. Also take breaks. Take breaks. There were a lot of times that I left when I was in college where I'd be working on an assignment in the computer lab, and then on my way back to my dorm, I solved the problem. Your brain will continue working in the background, so don't overwhelm yourself when you don't get it. Sometimes taking a break and revisiting it will help spark or help solidify, make those to make those connections in your brain.
Someone else from one of the earlier Ask Me Anythings we had said the exact same thing about taking breaks and how that can, like, sometimes just like looking away from the problem for a while can help you reach the aha moment. But they also said, like, well, a lot of times in computer engineering, you have to be perfect as far as like you can't have a misplaced period or comma in your code. But people try to be perfectionists. To the point of like not being able to finish things. And I wonder if you agree with that or if you've ever experienced anything.
Yeah. So I like to make this analogy about just about anything, not just coding. But do you know why machine learning languages, like machine learning algorithms, are so effective? Because they fail more often than they succeed. The machine learning algorithm is just about learning all the ways not to do something and then picking the one time it does and then doing it over and over and over again. And so the machines are not, when you look at artificial intelligence and machine learning, like they're not perfect at all. They just keep trying to get it wrong, to keep trying to get it wrong. They don't get frustrated because they're not people. So I like to promote that. Like, yes, I don't get it. It's frustrating. That's good. That's part of the process. Just, take a break, let your brain rest, go back at it. You don't need to be a perfectionist, and you don't need to find the answer right now, right away. I didn't mention breaks as part of my day-to-day, but I do take quite a bit of breaks where I'll take a walk around and get some coffee and talk to a coworker just to get my mind away from the problem I'm trying to solve. Another tactic that we use is known as rubber ducking. So what we do is I have actually a rubber duck at my desk at work, a little rubber duck. And the idea is try to explain your problem to another person. Sometimes I do it to like an actual coworker. I'm like, oh, I'm trying to figure something out, and I walk through to them. And as I'm walking through the problem with my coworker, I figure it out. So rubber ducking is the ability to do that, but with an imaginary avatar. So I can, like in this case, I can use this little penguin and pretend like I'm trying to explain, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem, but I don't get it. And as I'm trying to explain the problem, I solve the problem. These are other tactics to get you past that hump.
I definitely agree with that one. I've never heard of rubber ducking, but I'm going to use that. So anyone who's watching, we're in our last few minutes. So if you have, now's the time. If you have a question you've been like considering asking, now is the time to ask it. We have another question from a Canva Summer Bridge student, which is, when summer's over and kids start going back to school and possibly going to school online, will that affect your career or like any of the longer term things with the pandemic, I think?
I mean, if kids go back to school, if any, I mean, it will affect my career in the sense that we have more work to do. All these companies right now are scrambling to create either remote curriculum or online curriculum. Like somebody has to go in there and add that and code that. So there's more work for us than ever because there's such a demand to do things from a remote perspective. If I was working for Scholastic right now, I'd probably have no time at all, because those are the people who are most direct or already have a lot of the technology set up for educational learning. So yeah, if anything, it's going to be a positive effect as there's a demand for it now.
Very interesting. Well, let's see if there's any other questions while we're here. And if not, I want to ask, even if someone's not necessarily interested in being a software engineer, do you have any advice for high school students just broadly to like figure out what you want to do and have the confidence to pursue things?
Life is not a constant, right? I think we're in a rush to kind of like get to the finish line of some imaginary road. Like I have my job and I get married, have kids, and you want to settle down. I got lucky with my career in terms of like, I knew what I wanted to do young, and I did it eventually. I didn't do it as soon as I wanted to, but I did do it eventually. There are other people I've met who don't know what they want to do. They're uncertain. They kind of want to try different things out. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you should be open to continue to explore what it is that you want to do, right? You need to, I mean, having a career is like, I need to learn how to, part of it is like, you need to learn how to survive, right? You have to eat, you have to live and all that stuff. But your job and your career is a big part of your life. You'll spend more of your time working than you will with your friends and family. So don't hesitate to change your mind. Like if you're like, I'm not happy here and I want to do something else, explore it. Figure out a way to do it. I haven't met anybody who hasn't found a way of making making their way of life working one way or another. I have friends who are artists, who are like traditional like canvas and paint artists. They don't make a lot of money, but they make just enough money to survive, and they're like, I'm happy. This is the life I want. So my comment to you is like, this is your life. Live it and try to find what makes you happy. Because you only get one. You only get one life, and there's no sense in just staying and doing it. And don't get discouraged. Don't think that you have to fit some kind of mold of what your future needs to look like. It's going to be rough, because especially if like you want to be an artist or you want to be an actor or something a little bit more difficult than like a career in software development, then you just have to understand like that's what you're going in for. Like there's struggle associated with some certain life paths, but it is your life at the end of the day. Be secure in making the choices that you feel are best for yourself.
I think that's a great answer. So everyone who's watching, once again, make sure you've signed in on the link that's in the comments. And yeah, other than that, I think we're pretty much at the end here. If you have any like last bits of wisdom that you'd like to share, you've given us a lot. I feel like I've learned a lot listening to this.
I don't know. Thank you for having me. I don't know if I have any last bits of wisdom.
Well, you talked about how being involved with Mouse helped you. And so I think if, there's something to be learned from that as far as like, when you're in high schools, when you have the opportunity to get a lot of, even right now, all of you guys who are doing summer bridge, that involves exploring a lot of different things. So if you're a student and in high school, like getting involved with things like that, and trying out different clubs or getting involved with different organizations, I think, seeing how like that, getting involved with Mouse kind of helped launch you into this career, or launch your interest into, you launched yourself into the career, but like it launched your interests. I wonder if there's something to think about there.
Well, you just reminded me. So after I graduated college, and I didn't know what to do. Like I was like, I didn't have the confidence to get the job that I wanted to do. I didn't have a job lined up. And the first thing that came to mind was Mouse. And I told my parents, I'm gonna go to my old high school. I'm gonna see if I can volunteer for the mouse program. See if I can help the school around. And I got some resistance from my dad. He's like, you need a job. You just finished college. You need to do something with your life. And I remember telling him that that I needed to, that like, that's a process, looking for a job and everything. But I told him that I needed to focus on giving something before receiving something. And I think that is true for anything. So when I volunteered for Mouse, my perspective is I'm going to give back my time, my experience, my everything. Give my time, give that to Mouse. Give it volunteer my time, and somehow the universe will return that to me. I will receive something in return for that. I don't know what it was. I wasn't expecting to become a Mouse employee. I was just like, I need to do something to give to others. And if I didn't do that, then I wouldn't have volunteered for Mouse, which meant I wouldn't have become an employee at Mouse and gone on the career trajectory that I'm on. And I think a lot of times in this world, we tend to focus on what can I get? What can you give me? And I think that's kind of a backwards way of saying it. Coming out of college, the best time you have in your life is to give. While you're trying to figure out what you want to do, give. Well, go work for a nonprofit, volunteer at a soup kitchen. It will definitely help give you some perspective of what you want to do. But if you get stuck in that mindset of like me, or what can I get, I think you fall into this like mouse trap of life, of like trying to chase superficial things. That's my word. That's my last words of wisdom right there.
Words of wisdom. Juan, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for all your advice. This has been excellent. And everyone who's been watching, thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week with another cool professional in the tech industry. So thanks a lot, Juan.
Thanks.
And thanks, everyone.